And this as India rallies behind its first wholly indigenous aircraft carrier INS Vikrant today when it was commissioned by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. A sullen Congress didn't quite join the people in the pride and jubilation. Now, give credit where due was the Congress party's argument, as it claimed collective effort of all governments since 1999 that led up to this day. Will Prime Minister acknowledge? Let's also recall original INS Vikrant that served us well in 1971 war. That's how Congress's Jairam Ramesh chose to put it. Now, INS Vikrant is named after its namesake predecessor, which took part in the India-Pakistan War of 1971. The new one, the INS Vikrant, brings India to the rank of the countries which have their own aircraft carrier. With the commissioning today, which Prime Minister Narendra Modi termed as a historical day for the country's defense sector, India joined the rank of the United States of America, Russia, France, China, and the United Kingdom. Now, as the nation celebrates this supreme feat, is Congress seeking credit a valid argument or mere politicking? This is the big question that we are asking as Congress seeks credit for this. Now, this is what is happened. If we go back to the year 2005, in the month of April, there was a ceremonial steel cutting of the soon-to-be INS Vikrant. That happened in 2005 under the Congress regime. Now, if we take a look at what happened in 2009, in February, the key of the soon-to-be INS Vikrant was laid. Thereafter, in 2013, in the month of August, is when INS Vikrant was launched for the very first time. And this is when 80% of the structure was finally fabricated and the major machinery of INS Vikrant was installed. All that happened in 2017, in fact 2013, starting from 2005 under the Congress regime. Now, we are asking this big question. While India's glory, is it being politicized while Congress is seeking credit? Now, in 2013, the Defence Minister, A.K. Antony, had launched INS Vikrant. BJP, in fact, is going on to slam all this as mere politicking, calling it Rajniti over Rashtriya Suraksha for the Congress party. Now, Congress is also seeking credit, pinning the success on one man disrespects the others. That is what the Congress claims. BJP counters this and they say that some parties still carry the cross of Videshi Gulami. That is what the BJP is finally countering the Congress with this argument. Now, what Congress further goes on to say, will the Prime Minister acknowledge the collective efforts of all the governments since 2009? That is the claim that Congress party is making. BJP goes on to counter it, saying that Nehru and Rajiv Gandhi turned the naval warships into personal taxis. That is the big allegation that BJP levels at the Congress. So, credit war over INS Vikrant, who's politicizing India's glory, is the big debate. That is debate number 2 on Plain Speak. And to discuss that, joining me on the broadcast is Shazia Ilmi of the BJP. Also, Aishwarya Mahadev of the Congress party joins me. Gokul Chandran of he's a political analyst who is also joining me, and also on the broadcast will be G.J. Singh, who's the defense analyst. But before I go to my guests, let me quickly get in all the political reactions that have come about when it comes to this particular story, this crying foul over not getting ample credit over INS Vikrant.
प्रधानमंत्री जी को जरूर पता होगा कि 2009, 11 और 2013 उनके आने से पूर्व 3 महत्वपूर्ण माइलस्टोन्स। अगर अपने भाषण में उसका भी जिक्र करते तो एक बृहद संदेश जाता कि सामरिक मामलों में कम से कम हम एक दायरे से ऊपर उठ करके एक्नॉलेज कर रहे हैं कि 2009 में क्या हुआ, 11 में क्या हुआ, 13 में क्या हुआ, वो महत्वपूर्ण है।
प्रशंसा हम करते हैं इंडियन नेवी के इंजीनियर अफसर जो काम किए हैं, जो कारीगर, जो बिल्डर हैं, फिटर हैं, मैकेनिक हैं कोचिन शिपयार्ड में। पर ये कहना कि ये सिर्फ 2014 के बाद की उपलब्धि है, ये बिल्कुल गलत।
And I'll take this across to my guest now. Aishwarya Mahadev, I begin with you. What is the argument that the Congress party is making? The argument for seeking credit, what is the logic? Just explain to our viewers.
Good evening, Griha. I think first and foremost today, I'd like to congratulate every Indian and everybody who's been part of this effort, because the INS Vikrant brings us into this elite club of countries and, obviously further bolsters our naval power. And I think it is a proud moment for everybody today. But Griha, there are a few things that have to be spoken about plainly. I will give credit where it's due. This is the day for the Navy. And this, this entire idea of this is how you're politicking and whatnot is secondary. But I want to state one thing clearly. When a person basically talks about the entire achievement of the Navy having been limited to post-2014, then he talks about Ghulamgardi of the colonialists, and he talks about statements like almost insulting the Navy while talking about and making it seem like nothing had happened before they came into power. That is where there is a problem. From 1999 onwards, it has been a collective effort. And let me tell you one thing, INS Vikrant today is a very successful story of the transition and continuity of government that shows you successive governments, whether UP or NDA, have been able to bring this project to this culmination point. Right. But to have these conversations about the insignia where you talk about, which is also factually incorrect, where you talk about this slave George Cross coming back in the UPA, while in fact it was reinstated in the NDA time, and making that part of the larger discourse is what is extremely disappointing today. The Congress party basically has to state this is a victory for every single Indian. This is not for somebody to roughshod over the other saying, I did it better. This is for the Navy to take credit for the entirety of this day, and to diminish it in terms of the statements and the sentiments of the speech that was made is very insulting. Remember, we are all Indians. Remember, all of us do not need lessons on patriotism and nationalism from anybody. Today is everybody's success and victory, and to have these myopic views of how almost all development came 2014 is something that is extremely wrong, and the Congress party has pointed that out. And Griha, I think, if you were a true statesman, you would be bipartisan to acknowledge that there have been successive governments who have worked on this. There have been so many decades of naval men pre-2014 who have also been part of this. And this is every single person's effort and victory today. That is what the Congress party is stating.
Okay. All right. Point taken. Shazia Ilmi of the BJP is also with us now. Shazia, would you like to respond to what Aishwarya has just mentioned?
I don't think that I should dignify that comment or allegation made at the BJP that one is trying to take credit for anything. I think it's a moment of glory. I think a lot is being done to instill a sense of confidence in who we are, and for this great, huge effort. But to, always be, instead of applauding and honoring all that is being done, to make it to force a false sense of bipartisanship doesn't seem to be any real answer. It is what it is. It is for everybody to see. If you're looking for a way to always have a controversy and just pick holes, nobody will stop you. But there is something to be celebrated there. There is a time for some positive sentiment. Why ruin it every time something like this happens? I mean, why be such a sore loser and make it about yourself and you not getting enough credit? The fact is something great is being done and has been done and is being done.
Aishwarya, that's a fair point actually. And I liked how you began answering my question. Why was it not done by the Congress party in the first place? Why directly go ahead and attack? This is a great day for Indian Navy and the country in general. Why not acknowledge that before going ahead and just accusing? That is also a main argument.
Griha, to be very honest, if you're saying why was it not done by the Congress party, I could turn around and say in 2013 itself was when the INS Vikrant began its trials. And you also realize Mr. A.K. Antony spoke about it that day. If you wanted to say when this became seafaring, you can talk about 2013 in itself. The singular argument we're making is when the head of the state comes out and talks about this colonial legacy. And in his entire speech, I will also add to the fact of this insignia that came in. And when, he talks about how it was like a colonial legacy, it was Ghulam Gardi and things like that. Is it not an insult to the entire naval forces? Forget which government did what, though you yourselves have been caught out on a lie. But the fact remains, we appreciate what has happened today. We believe this is a huge achievement for all of India. But I believe in you, as the head of a state, cannot be bipartisan when you make references such as this in your speech during the day. Obviously, the Congress is going to point out, the Congress could have easily said it was basically on the water in 2013, for all you know. But we've obviously congratulated the government, the Navy, and everybody else in this effort. We're just saying, do not take away from the fact that successive governments have been part of the military buildup in this country and what has happened over the years. And to almost make it seem like nothing existed before 2014 is shameful, because every one of these industries you talk about today, from the DRDO to who gave you what products in there, most of those institutions also came in during our time. We're saying there was no necessity for you to have this conversation.
I mean, why use this platform to sort of, in a veiled manner, attack the opposition, attack the Congress party which was in power, and why not acknowledge simply? That's the charge that the Congress is levelling. Quickly respond, and then I'll take it across to Mr. Gokul Chandran as well.
You know, the fact of the matter is that INS Vikrant is different from its predecessor. There's something new has happened. That this whole idea of Make in India is about self-confidence and breaking away from a colonial legacy and the way we looked at ourselves as a nation and our capabilities. So there is something to be said there. Now there is such a guilty conscience and a lack of what do you call sportsmanship and a sense of competition at everything that happens. That is for Congress and other people to answer, not for us. But the fact is that this is a huge. I mean, this is a huge feat. I mean, it's laudable.
We agree to that. Bishazia, the point that Aishwarya is also making, the keel, for example, was laid in 2009 under the Congress regime. Why can't it be acknowledged? I think that's simply putting it, that acknowledgement which is due to the governments, the successive governments since 2009 was missing. That is the argument that Congress is making. I want your reaction to that.
No, I don't think so. I think it's for everybody to see what has happened this year and what with the new naval insignia and the importance of that and what it means, even as a symbol, and the might of the naval fleet today and the power it has in the new dynamic, in this new order as we speak, and where India stands vis-a-vis its foreign policy. It is, after all, the Congress which has been so critical of this government and of present regime when it comes to the foreign policy. So, you can't be critical of some and want to take credit for some. This always been critical.
Okay.
Whether it's Central Vista or the Lions. So what is the criticism?
Let me actually take this to Mr. Gokul Chandran. Mr. Gokul Chandran, what do you make of this?
Manner.
Yes, okay. What do you make of this entire controversy that has erupted, and sadly on this day? We should have been proud of what happened today. Why this? Did we need it?
Good evening.
Good evening.
As a former naval officer who served Indian Navy for at least some time, that too on board ships. So I'm very proud that Indian Navy could achieve what it has achieved today, and I'm very proud about that. Secondly, on what Mr. Modi has addressed the nation today, see, it is very cheap and it shows the petty mindset of the Prime Minister of our nation. We all know the ship, as Shasya told, Prime Minister was not attacking Congress. No, he was not attacking Congress, but Prime Minister was making fun of all naval personnel who was serving for this nation, calling them as slaves. He didn't call Congress. No, I don't think he called Congress, but he called the naval personnel who were and who was serving Indian Navy and Mother India for all this long time. He's calling them slaves. That is the mindset which Narendra Modi holds. And when you talk about the ship, Shasya was pointing out about Make in India, Atmanirbhar. See, that is what we are telling. That is what Mr. Jairam Ramesh tweeted, telling that this Atmanirbhar and Make in India, which you are highlighting, which you are thinking that it is your brand and product. No, even the Congress party, well before you were even born, even before you were conceived, we started doing that. That is what Mr. Jairam Ramesh wanted to make it clear. And regarding the flag, it is very sad that again that is being highlighted here. as Aishwarya pointed out, it is not the UPA government which brought back the central cross to the flag. It is it was a decision taken by the Indian Navy that since only the Indian emblem without that red cross is not visible at sea, it was a technical decision that was taken to include the red cross. Again, it was done by the Indian Navy during the period of Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So even Mr. Modi is mocking his guru Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So BJP and Mr. Modi and other leaders should stop showing this pettiness.
And that's an important point. GJ Singh, I'd like to bring you in here. Mr. Singh, Shazi, I'll come to you. I'll come to you 1 second. I'd get Mr. Singh in. He's been patiently listening to this entire debate. Mr. Singh, we're talking about the ensign over here. The fact that under Prime Minister Modi, that sign was changed once and then the St. George's Cross was brought back. That is also something that needs to be actually underlined over here. What is the big deal of calling it in those many words something which is to do with Gulami and stuff like that? We understand that it has been a colonial legacy of the country, but the way it was put on that stage by the Prime Minister was also being questioned.
Greha, first of all, I must say that we need to change the approach toward this day, a day of feeling proud, a day of celebration, a day of dancing. As it is said that to everything there's a season and a time for every matter under the heaven, time to speak, time to keep silent, time to dance, time to mourn. I think this is the day we should feel proud and not speak about the differences because today, the 2nd September 2022 marks a historic milestone of our realization as a country, as India, as a nation, this commitment towards self-reliance and what we famously call Atmanirbhar Bharat. But we must also weigh in as to when did the birth of naval aviation or that the birth of the aircraft carriers in the Indian Navy happened or took place. That was in 1961 when the Honorable Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru went all the way to Bombay to receive INS Vikrant, which was commissioned in Vikrant, brought to India in those days, and it was given a very befitting reception in the country. So we as naval officers, defense officers, are committed to serve the government of the day, the government of the time and era, as our predecessors have been doing it. And I would say that I don't see any sense in fighting over it because navies are, ships are ours, this is our country.
Right, absolutely, and that's a very utopian sort of a point that you're making, Mr. Singh. But I'd let Shazia come in here. Yes, Shazia, you wanted to respond to what Mr. Chandran said.
I think something very objectionable what has been said about the BJP by the speaker before Mr. Singh. I don't know his name.
Mr. Gokul Chandran, yes. Please go ahead.
Yes, who was obviously speaking for the Congress party. So let me remind the gentleman here who seems to have served the Navy that the former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi did use INS Vikrant as his personal taxi for his vacation. So that is nothing to be proud of. And I may also tell you that it did take 74 years for India to make the first indigenous aircraft carrier. And just for that, I think we should salute Modi and this government. So let's not be so rich about the fact that all governments, this has been, all the governments have continued to serve equally. There is something new that was done, which was not done earlier. And so this was commissioned by Prime Minister Modi. So you don't want that celebration to take place, and you again want to jump in because Jairam Ramesh feels left out. And the fact is, we were left out at a certain level.
All right.
And finally, we're catching up.
What happens over here is we're talking on the day of the commissioning of INS Vikrant. It's a very, very important day. Very important day for India's naval history and the country in general. This possibly could have been left aside is something that we should actually go ahead and internalize. This is a big day. Probably this could have been done away with, and this sort of mudslinging could have been avoided on this important day. That's what I want to leave it at, and slip into a very short break here. That's all when it comes to this particular debate. I'd like to thank all my guests who have joined me. right here on Plain Speak. Slipping into a very short break here on CNN News 18 and coming right back with more.